For years, my son claimed he worked the night shift at a factory. During Christmas week, I decided to surprise him with dinner. However, the supervisor said, "That position was eliminated last year." Then he added, "Would you like to know why? Please come with me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from." The casserole dish was still warm in my hands when I pulled into the factory parking lot that December evening. Steam rose from beneath the aluminum foil, carrying the scent of my son Michael's favorite meal. Beef stroganoff with those wide egg noodles he'd loved since childhood. I'd spent the afternoon preparing it, remembering how he used to come home from school and devour 3 helpings while telling me about his day. Those conversations felt like decades ago now, though Michael was only 38. Somewhere between his 20th birthday and today, my son had become a stranger who lived in my guest house, worked the night shift at Meridian Manufacturing, and barely spoke more than necessary when our paths crossed in the driveway. The Christmas lights I'd strung across our Indiana farmhouse porch seemed to mock me from 3 miles away. My daughter Susan had hung them for me last week, though she'd complained the entire time about the cold and how I should just move into a retirement community. My daughter-in-law Vanessa had agreed with her, naturally. Vanessa agreed with anything that might separate me from my property. But tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was about reaching my son, about breaking through whatever wall had grown between us. The holidays always made me sentimental, made me remember when Michael would wake at dawn on Christmas morning, his eyes bright with wonder. I wanted to see something, anything, of that boy and the man he'd become. The factory loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of steel and concrete that had employed half our county for 40 years. Meridian Manufacturing produced precision components for agricultural equipment. Michael had been so proud when he got hired 6 years ago, right after his divorce. He'd called it a fresh start, a chance to prove himself. I parked near the main entrance, grabbed the casserole, and made my way through the cold night air. My breath came out in white puffs, and my arthritis complained about the temperature, but I ignored both. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and a security guard looked up from his desk. "Help you, ma'am? I'm here to see my son, Michael Campbell. He works the night shift." The guard's expression shifted, something I couldn't quite read. He picked up his phone, spoke quietly, then replaced the receiver. "Someone will be right down." I expected Michael. Instead, a man in his 50s appeared, wearing a shirt and tie despite the late hour. His face was drawn, exhausted in a way that suggested more than just a long day. "Mrs. Campbell, I'm Bruce Rogers, the operations supervisor. Could you come with me, please? I just wanted to bring Michael his dinner. Ma'am, I need you to come with me. Now." The urgency in his voice sent ice through my veins. "Is Michael hurt? Has there been an accident?" "No accident." He held open a door marked Administration. "But we need to talk about your son." I followed him down a corridor lined with motivational posters and safety reminders. My heart hammered against my ribs. The casserole felt heavier with each step. Rogers led me into a small conference room and closed the door. He didn't sit, and neither did I. "Mrs. Campbell, when was the last time you spoke with Michael about his work?" He doesn't talk much about it. He leaves around 10 each night, comes home around 8 in the morning. Why? What's happened?" Rogers rubbed his face. "Your son hasn't worked here in 13 months. The room tilted. I set the casserole on the table to steady myself. "That's impossible. He leaves for work every night. His position was eliminated last October, part of a restructuring. We offered him a different role on the day shift, but he declined. Said he'd rather collect unemployment and look for something else." My mouth opened, but no words came. 13 months. 13 months of watching Michael leave the guest house at 9:30 each night, his lunchbox in hand, his work boots on his feet. 13 months of him returning each morning, claiming exhaustion, retreating to sleep away the daylight hours. "Where has he been going?" I whispered. "That's what I'd like to know." Rogers pulled out a chair and sat heavily. "Mrs. Campbell, I'm going to show you something. But I need you to understand that what I'm about to share is extremely confidential. I'm only doing this because I think you might be the only person who can help us understand what's happened." He opened a laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet filled with technical specifications, drawings, and what appeared to be manufacturing processes. These are proprietary designs for our new hydraulic system. We've spent 4 years and $7 million developing this technology. It was supposed to revolutionize efficiency in combine harvesters. He scrolled down. 3 months ago, our competitor, Hartwell Agricultural Systems, announced a nearly identical product. They'll have it on the market 6 months before we can launch ours. I don't understand what this has to do with Michael. Rogers looked at me with something between pity and desperation. 2 weeks ago, our IT department discovered that these files were accessed and copied multiple times over the past year. The access came from your son's old employee credentials. The words hung in the air like a sentence of death. Michael would never... The logs don't lie, Mrs. Campbell. Someone used his login information to access our most sensitive data. Either it was him, or he gave his credentials to someone else. Rogers leaned forward. Hartwell is now on the verge of bankruptcy. They invested everything in fast-tracking this product based on our stolen designs, but there were critical flaws in the development process that they didn't understand. Flaws that we caught and corrected, but that weren't included in the stolen files. How many people work at Hartwell? Nearly 3,000, across 5 states. If they go under, all of those jobs disappear, and Meridian will still take years to recover our investment. We've had to lay off 200 workers already. His voice cracked slightly. These are people I know, Mrs. Campbell. People with families. Kids who need Christmas presents. I sank into the chair, my legs unable to support me. Why are you telling me this? Why not just call the police? We did. The FBI is involved. But the evidence is complicated. The theft occurred through remote access from locations we can't trace. Hartwell claims they developed their design independently, without proof of direct contact between Michael and Hartwell, without documentation of payment or communication. The legal case is weak. He closed the laptop. But I think you might know something. I think there might be records, papers, something in his living space that could help us understand what really happened. You want me to spy on my own son. I want you to help thousands of innocent people keep their jobs. And I want you to understand that your son is either guilty of industrial espionage or someone is setting him up brilliantly. Either way, don't you want to know the truth? I stood, my hands shaking. I need to go home. Mrs. Campbell, I need to think. I grabbed the casserole, needing something to hold on to. I won't discuss this with anyone, but I can't promise anything else. Rogers handed me a business card. That's my personal cell phone. Anytime, day or night. Please, if you find anything, if you learn anything, people are counting on us. I walked back through the factory in a daze. The security guard watched me leave, his expression sympathetic now. He knew. They all knew that Michael Campbell was either a traitor or the most elaborate patsy in corporate history. The drive home took forever, and no time at all. I pulled into my driveway at 9:15, parking in my usual spot beside the main house. The guest house sat 50 yards away, dark except for the blue glow of a television in the window. Michael's truck was there. He was home, which meant in 45 minutes he would emerge, lunchbox in hand, and drive off to... Where? I sat in my car, the casserole cooling in my lap, and stared at the home I'd lived in for 47 years. The home my husband had died in. The home where I'd raised 2 children. The home that suddenly felt like a stage where everyone was performing a play I didn't understand. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Mom, we need to talk about Thanksgiving expenses. Susan and I think it's time you started contributing to family gatherings financially since you insist on hosting. I stared at the message, then at the guest house, then at the business card Bruce Rogers had given me. 13 months of lies. But lies covering what? And if I pulled at this thread, what would unravel? At 9:40, the guest house door opened. Michael emerged, lunchbox in hand, exactly as he had for over a year. He climbed into his truck without glancing at the main house. I made a decision. I waited until his taillights disappeared down the county road. Then I retrieved the spare key to the guest house from my kitchen drawer, the one Michael didn't know I'd kept when I'd given him the main set. My heart pounded as I crossed the dark lawn. I was 72 years old, arthritic and exhausted, about to break into my own property to search my son's private space. But Bruce Rogers was right about one thing. I needed to know the truth. I unlocked the door and stepped into my son's secret life. The guest house smelled like stale coffee and unwashed laundry. I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the light switch, taking in the space that had once been my late husband's workshop. Robert had spent countless hours here, building furniture and repairing equipment. After he died 8 years ago, I'd converted it into a small apartment. Kitchenette, bathroom, living area, and bedroom. A place for Michael to rebuild his life after the divorce. Now it felt like a crime scene I was contaminating. I moved carefully, my nurse's training from 50 years ago kicking in. Observe, don't disturb, document what you see. I pulled out my phone and began taking photos, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for. The living area was surprisingly neat. Michael had always been tidy, unlike his sister Susan, whose teenage bedroom had been a disaster zone. The small dining table held a laptop, closed, probably password protected. A stack of mail sat beside it, mostly junk and a few bills. I photographed the envelopes without opening them. The kitchen revealed nothing unusual. Dishes in the sink, a half-empty coffee pot, the refrigerator stocked with bachelor basics. I checked the trash. Takeout containers, beer bottles, nothing suspicious. The bedroom made my chest tighten. Michael's bed was unmade, his work boots lined up beside the closet. I recognized the quilt covering his bed. I'd made it for his 16th birthday. He'd kept it through college, through his marriage, through everything. The closet held clothes arranged by type. Work shirts, casual shirts, pants, jackets. On the top shelf, I spotted several shoeboxes. I pulled one down, expecting old photographs or memorabilia. Instead, I found cash. Neat bundles of $20 and $50 bills, rubber banded together. My hands trembled as I counted. $3,000 in one box alone. I checked the others. More cash, prepaid credit cards still in their packaging, a burner phone, unopened, and in the last box, a ledger. My son kept a handwritten ledger like someone from the 1950s. Dates, amounts, cryptic abbreviations. Nothing that explicitly said payment for corporate espionage, but the numbers were substantial. Entries going back 14 months, 1 month before he'd lost his job at Meridian. I photographed every page, my hands shaking so badly I had to brace the phone against the closet door frame. Then I heard it, the sound of tires on gravel. My heart stopped. I checked my watch. 10:15. Michael had only been gone 35 minutes. He never returned this quickly. I shoved the boxes back onto the shelf, closed the closet, and rushed toward the door. Through the window, I saw not Michael's truck, but my daughter Susan's white SUV pulling up beside my car. Relief and irritation flooded through me in equal measure. I slipped out the guest house door, locked it, and was halfway across the lawn when Susan emerged from her vehicle. "Mom? What are you doing out here in the dark?" My mind raced. I thought I heard something, checking the guest house. Susan frowned, her highlighted hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. At 41, she'd inherited her father's sharp features and, unfortunately, her mother-in-law's suspicious nature. Heard what? Probably nothing. A raccoon, maybe. What are you doing here? Vanessa called me, said you'd been acting strange lately, driving around at odd hours, not answering your phone. She crossed her arms. Are you feeling all right? Because if you're having memory issues, we need to discuss. I'm 72, not senile. I moved toward the main house, hoping she'd follow and stop staring at the guest house. And I answer my phone when I feel like it. Since when do I need to report my whereabouts? Since Vanessa and I started worrying about you living out here alone. Susan followed me inside, immediately wrinkling her nose at the casserole dish I'd left on the kitchen counter. You made stroganoff? For who? Myself. I'm allowed to cook. At 9 at night? She picked up the dish, noting it was still slightly warm. Mom, this is exactly what we're talking about. Erratic behavior. Cooking full meals and not eating them. We think it's time to seriously consider assisted living. Absolutely not. Be reasonable. This property is too much for you. The maintenance alone is managed just fine. I have handymen for repairs, a service for the lawn, and my own 2 hands for everything else. I took the casserole from her and covered it with plastic wrap. "Why are you really here, Susan?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. Vanessa and I have been talking to a real estate agent. This property could sell for substantial money. Enough to get you into a nice facility with round-the-clock care and still leave inheritance for Michael and me." There it was. The real agenda. "This house isn't for sale. Mom, be practical. You're 72. What happens when you fall and can't get up? What happens when I need you, and you're too busy calculating your inheritance to answer the phone?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was exhausted and rattled from what I'd discovered in Michael's closet. Susan's face hardened. "That's not fair. We're trying to help you." "Help me or help yourselves?" I moved toward the door, a clear dismissal. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Go home to your family." We're not done discussing this. Tonight we are. After Susan left, her taillights disappearing down the same road Michael had taken an hour earlier, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the photos on my phone. The ledger entries stared back at me, damning and mysterious in equal measure. The first entry was dated October 18th of last year. MT $5,000. Then November 3rd. MT $7,500. December had 3 entries. January had 2. The amounts varied, but the abbreviation MT appeared consistently. Some entries had additional notes. Phase 1 complete, delivery confirmed, final specs transferred. My son was either guilty or someone had constructed an elaborate frame so perfect it would convince any jury. I thought about calling Bruce Rogers, but something held me back. Once I handed over this evidence, there would be no taking it back. Michael would be arrested, charged, destroyed. And what if there was another explanation? What if... My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then reconsidered. "Hello? Mrs. Campbell?" A woman's voice, professional and cool. "This is Louis Marks from Hartwell Agricultural Systems. I understand you visited Meridian Manufacturing this evening." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you know that?" "We have mutual concerns regarding your son's activities. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. There are things you need to understand about the situation. Things Meridian hasn't told you. I'm not interested in..." "Michael is being set up, Mrs. Campbell. And if you don't help us prove it, he's going to prison for crimes he didn't commit." A pause. "There's a coffee shop in town, Rosie's Diner. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone, tell no one. If you contact the authorities before we speak, evidence that could exonerate your son will disappear." The line went dead. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, my late husband's clock ticking on the wall, and felt the world shifting beneath me. One conversation with Bruce Rogers had unlocked a cascade I couldn't control. Now both sides of this corporate war wanted something from me, and my son was trapped in the middle. Whether as villain or victim, I still couldn't tell. At 11:30, I heard Michael's truck return. I watched from my darkened kitchen as he parked and entered the guest house, moving with the exhausted shuffle of a man returning from work. Except he hadn't been at work. So where had he been for 2 hours? I waited until his lights went out. Then I retrieved Bruce Rogers' business card from my purse. My finger hovered over the phone's keypad. One call could end this. One call could bring in the FBI, federal charges, truth, whatever that meant. Instead, I photographed the card and put it back in my purse. At dawn, I was still awake, sitting at my kitchen table, studying the photos of Michael's ledger. I'd made coffee and toast but couldn't eat. My mind kept circling the same questions. What was MT? Where did Michael go every night? Who was Louis Marks, really? And why did both Meridian and Hartwell seem so desperate to control the narrative? At 7:30, I heard the guest house door open. Michael emerged, climbed into his truck, and drove away. His normal morning routine after a night shift that didn't exist. I gave him 10 minutes. Then I returned to the guest house with my spare key. This time, I went straight to the laptop on his dining table. I opened it, unsurprised to find it password protected. But beside it, tucked under a newspaper, was a small notebook. I'd missed it last night in my rush. The notebook contained names, phone numbers, and addresses. Some were crossed out. Others had check marks beside them. At the top of one page, Manufacturing contacts, verified. Another page, distribution network, phase 2. And on the last page, in my son's handwriting, if something happens to me, Mom, check the safety deposit box at County First Bank. Box 447. Key is in my truck, hidden under the driver's seat mat. Everything is there. I'm sorry. I had to protect you. M. My breath caught. A safety deposit box I didn't know about. A key I'd never seen. An apology that assumed he might not survive to deliver it in person. Whatever Michael was involved in, it was more dangerous than corporate espionage. And somehow, protecting me was part of his calculation. I photographed the notebook page, then carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. At 9:45, I drove into town for my meeting with Louis Marks, the woman who'd called from Hartwell, the woman who claimed she could prove my son's innocence, the woman who might be trying to manipulate a frightened old mother into destroying evidence that could save him, or condemn him further. I parked outside Rosie's diner and sat for a moment, gathering courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Through the window, I could see a woman in a business suit sitting alone in a back booth, watching the door, watching for me. I thought about Michael's note. I had to protect you. From what? From who? I grabbed my purse and stepped out of my car, walking toward answers that would either save my son or reveal him as someone I'd never really known. Behind me, I didn't notice the dark sedan that had followed me from the farm. Didn't see the man inside raising a camera to photograph me entering the diner. But somewhere, someone was watching. Someone who didn't want Louis Marks and me to have this conversation, and they were willing to make sure it never happened. Louis Marks was younger than I'd expected, early 40s, with auburn hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that assessed me with clinical precision. She stood as I approached, extending a hand that gripped mine with surprising strength. Mrs. Campbell, thank you for coming. Please, sit. I slid into the booth across from her, setting my purse beside me. Rosie's diner was mostly empty at this hour. A few regulars at the counter, a waitress refilling coffee. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the woman in the corner booth was drowning. You said Michael was being set up, I began, keeping my voice low. Explain. Louis pulled a tablet from her briefcase and angled it toward me. What did Bruce Rogers tell you about Hartwell's product development? That you stole Meridian's designs? That you're going bankrupt because the designs were flawed? Half true. She tapped the screen, bringing up technical drawings. We did develop a hydraulic system based on information we received, but we didn't steal it from Meridian. We purchased it legally from a third-party consulting firm called MT Solutions. MT, the same abbreviation in Michael's ledger. My face must have shown recognition because Louis leaned forward. You've seen those initials before. It wasn't a question. I said nothing. MT Solutions approached us 18 months ago with proprietary agricultural technology. They had patents pending, proof of concept, everything properly documented. We paid them $3 million for exclusive rights. She scrolled through documents, contracts, wire transfers, technical specifications. 6 months into development, we discovered critical flaws. When we tried to contact MT Solutions, they'd vanished. Shell company, fake addresses, the works. What does this have to do with Michael? MT Solutions was registered to your son. He's listed as CEO and sole proprietor. Every payment we made went to accounts in his name. She pulled up another document, a corporate filing with Michael's signature at the bottom. According to every legal record, your son defrauded us out of $3 million. The diner walls seemed to close in. That's impossible. Michael doesn't have that kind of expertise. He was a floor manager, not an engineer. Exactly. Which is why Hartwell believes he's a patsy. Louis closed the tablet. Someone with deep knowledge of both companies used your son as a front. They fed us stolen designs through him, collected our money, and disappeared. Now Michael takes the fall. Meridian gets to play victim, and the real thief walks away clean. Who would do that? We have theories. Someone at Meridian with access to proprietary information and a grudge. Someone who knew Michael lost his job and was vulnerable. She paused. Someone who could manipulate him into cooperating without understanding what he was really doing. My mind raced through possibilities. If you know Michael's innocent, why haven't you gone to the authorities? Because we need proof, and Michael won't talk to us. We've tried contacting him, but he's vanished. Doesn't answer his phone, doesn't respond to messages. Lewis's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Campbell, Hartwell is dying. We've laid off 800 people already. Another 1,000 will lose their jobs by March if we can't recover our investment. But more than that, if we go down, we're taking Michael with us. The FBI has already interviewed him twice. They're building a fraud case that will put him in federal prison for 20 years. He goes to work every night, I said quietly. At least he leaves the house every night. Where's he really going? We don't know. That's what we need you to help us discover. She slid a business card across the table. If you find any evidence, documentation, communications, anything that might reveal who's actually behind this, call me immediately. Not the FBI, not Meridian. Us. Because we're the only ones who actually want to prove your son is innocent. I pocketed the card without committing to anything. Why should I trust you? Because the alternative is trusting Bruce Rogers. And Meridian has 3 million reasons to make sure your son looks guilty. Lewis stood, leaving a $20 bill on the table. Think about it. But don't think too long. Time is running out for everyone. She left through the back exit, and I sat alone with my untouched coffee, trying to process what I'd learned. If Lewis was telling the truth, Michael was caught between two corporations using him as a weapon against each other. If she was lying, I'd just given her information by my reactions and my presence here. I was halfway to my car when I noticed the dark sedan parked 3 spaces down. The same sedan I'd seen outside my farm yesterday, though I hadn't registered it consciously at the time. Now, seeing it here, my nursing instincts kicked in, the ones that had taught me to notice patterns, to trust when something felt wrong. I walked past it casually, noting the rental company sticker and the man inside pretending to read his phone. He was watching me in his side mirror. I drove home slowly, checking behind me. The sedan followed at a distance, professional and patient. Someone was tracking my movements. But who? Meridian, making sure I didn't help Hartwell? Hartwell, making sure I didn't go to the FBI? Or someone else entirely? The mysterious puppet master pulling strings? When I reached my farm, I didn't pull into the driveway. Instead, I continued past, taking a county road that looped back toward town. The sedan followed. After 10 minutes of rural roads, I pulled into a gas station, parked at the pump, and went inside to pay. Through the window, I watched the sedan park across the street. The man inside made a phone call. I bought a prepaid phone with cash, a trick I'd learned from crime shows Susan mocked me for watching. Then I filled my gas tank slowly, giving the man plenty of time to wonder what I was doing. Back in my car, I activated the phone and called Bruce Rogers. Mrs. Campbell? I've been trying to reach you. Someone's following me. A dark sedan, rental plates. Silence. Then, where are you? Parker's gas station on Route 9. Who's watching me, Mr. Rogers? I don't know, but you need to come in. Now. FBI agents are here. They have questions. My heart sank. About what? About your visit here last night. Someone reported that we showed you confidential documents without authorization. There's an investigation into whether we've compromised the case against your son. His voice dropped. Mrs. Campbell, did you meet with anyone from Hartwell today? The lie came easily. No. Are you certain? Because if you've been contacted by their legal team, you need to tell me. They're desperate, and desperate people make dangerous mistakes. I ended the call and sat in my car, hands shaking. Everyone wanted something from me. Everyone claimed to be helping Michael, and I trusted none of them. At 2 o'clock, I finally returned home. The sedan was gone, but that didn't comfort me. I went straight to the guest house. Michael would be sleeping after his supposed night shift, and let myself in quietly. He was asleep in his bedroom, snoring softly, one arm flung over his face. He looked younger in sleep, like the boy who'd once trusted me with every secret. Now he kept secrets that could destroy him, and I didn't know if it was by choice or by force. I moved to the closet and pulled down the shoeboxes. The cash was still there, but something was different. I counted quickly. $500 missing from one bundle. Michael had taken money since my search last night. The ledger showed a new entry. Added this morning in different ink. Final payment. MT complete. Burn it all. They're getting close. My blood ran cold. Burn what? Evidence? Documents? The entire fabricated company? I photographed the entry and replaced everything carefully. Then I went to Michael's truck parked outside and checked under the driver's seat mat. The key was there, exactly where his note said it would be. A small brass key labeled CFNB 447, County First National Bank, Box 447. Everything is there, Michael had written. I pocketed the key and went back inside the guest house. In his bedroom, I paused beside his sleeping form. His face was thinner than I remembered, shadows under his eyes even in sleep. Stress lines I hadn't noticed before. Michael, I whispered, what have you done? What have they done to you? He stirred but didn't wake. I left him there and returned to the main house, where I found Susan's car in my driveway and Vanessa's Mercedes parked beside it. They were waiting in my kitchen like an ambush. Mom, we need to talk. Susan stood with her arms crossed. Vanessa sat at my table, a folder spread before her. Real estate listings and retirement community brochures. Not now, girls. I'm tired. No, now. Vanessa's voice was sharp. Susan and I have been discussing this, and we've made a decision. You're not safe here alone. Michael is clearly involved in something illegal. The FBI came to our house asking questions about him. If he's under investigation, this property could be seized as proceeds of crime. That's ridiculous. I own this property outright. Michael just rents the guest house. Does he pay rent? Vanessa challenged. Because if he doesn't, and he's been living here while committing fraud, the government can argue you knowingly provided him housing to facilitate criminal activity. My daughter-in-law was a paralegal, just enough legal knowledge to be dangerous and not enough to know when she was wrong. But the fear her words planted was real. We've found a lovely assisted living facility, Susan continued, pushing the brochures toward me. You could move in by January. We'll handle selling the property, dividing the proceeds. You'll handle it? My property isn't yours to handle. Mom, be reasonable. Michael is going to prison. When that happens, who do you think will take care of you? Us. So we're making decisions in your best interest. I stared at my daughter and daughter-in-law, these women I'd loved and welcomed into my life, and saw something I'd refused to acknowledge before. They'd already written Michael off, already calculated their inheritance, already decided I was too old to have a say in my own future. Get out. Susan blinked. What? Get out of my house. Both of you. Right now. Mom, you're being irrational. I'm being clear. This is my home, my property, my decision, and I'm telling you to leave. Vanessa stood, gathering her papers with exaggerated patience. We're trying to help you, whether you're capable of seeing that or not. When reality catches up, don't expect us to clean up the mess. They left in a flurry of slammed doors and indignant exits. I watched them drive away, then I locked every door and window in the house. At 4 o'clock, Michael emerged from the guest house. I watched from my kitchen window as he climbed into his truck, not to leave for his non-existent night shift, but heading out in the afternoon, which wasn't his pattern. I grabbed my keys and followed him. He drove into town, parked outside County First National Bank, and went inside. I parked across the street and waited. 15 minutes later, he emerged carrying a manila envelope, looked around nervously, and drove to the post office. I followed him inside, staying several people back in line. Michael mailed the envelope, priority overnight to an address I couldn't see, then left quickly. The key in my pocket felt like it was burning through my clothes. Whatever was in that safety deposit box, Michael had just mailed something from it. Something urgent. Something that couldn't wait. I returned to the bank and approached a teller. Hello, I need to access my safety deposit box. I showed her the key. Box 447. She checked her computer. I'll need to see identification, Mrs. Campbell. My heart nearly stopped. She knew my name, which meant, your son added you as an authorized accessor last week. Standard procedure for estate planning. One moment, please. Michael had given me access. Deliberately. He wanted me to find whatever was in that box. The teller led me to the vault, used her key with mine, and pulled out a long metal box. She left me alone in a small private room. Inside the box, Files. Dozens of files. Contracts with Michael's forged signature. Emails printed out. Correspondence with Hartwell that Michael never wrote. Bank statements showing deposits Michael never received. And a flash drive labeled Insurance. At the bottom, a handwritten letter on yellow legal paper. Mom, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or arrested. Everything here proves I didn't do this. I was set up by someone at Meridian, someone with enough access to forge everything. I tried to find proof, but I'm not smart enough. You always said I should have been more like Susan. Maybe you were right. I'm sorry I couldn't be the son you deserved. The flash drive has recordings. Get them to someone who can help. I love you. Michael. I sat in that sterile bank room and cried. For my son, for the trap he was in, for the years of distance between us that I'd never understood. Then I dried my eyes, pocketed the flash drive, and left everything else in the box. Because Michael was wrong about one thing. I didn't want him to be like Susan. I wanted him alive and free, and I was going to have to be smarter than everyone hunting him to make that happen. I drove home with the flash drive hidden in my bra, a precaution that would have seemed paranoid a week ago, but now felt perfectly reasonable. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The dark sedan was back, 3 cars behind me, not even trying to hide anymore. At home, I parked and walked to my door with deliberate calm, refusing to look at my follower. Inside, I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, breathing hard. At 72, I'd survived cancer, buried a husband, raised 2 children through their worst years, and worked 40 years in emergency room nursing. I'd seen death and trauma and human suffering in every form, but I'd never been hunted before. The flash drive felt like it was burning against my skin. I needed to see what was on it, but I couldn't risk using my home computer. If someone was following me, they might have access to my network. Instead, I went to my bedroom and retrieved the old laptop Susan had given me 3 Christmases ago, the one I'd never bothered to set up. I'd kept it in its box, unused, like so many well-intentioned gifts from children who didn't know what their parents actually needed. Now it was perfect. No internet connection, no way to trace what I was viewing. I set it up at my kitchen table, my hands shaking as I inserted the flash drive. It contained audio files, dozens of them, each labeled with dates spanning the past 14 months. I clicked the first one, dated 2 weeks after Michael lost his job at Meridian. Static, then voices. Understand what you're asking me to do. Michael's voice, strained and frightened. I'm not asking, I'm offering. A second voice, male, older, cultured. You need money. You need purpose. And you need to understand that what happened to you at Meridian wasn't random restructuring. You were specifically targeted for elimination. Why would anyone target me? Because you're loyal. Because you ask questions. Because you saw things in that factory that certain people didn't want seen. A pause. Safety violations? Falsified quality reports? Shortcuts that saved money but compromised product integrity? You remember filing those concerns with management? That was 2 years ago. I thought they'd been addressed. They were buried, and you became a liability. So they eliminated your position and made sure you'd never work in manufacturing again. Character references, quiet calls to other companies. You've applied for 43 jobs in the past year, Michael. How many interviews did you get? Silence. Then Michael, barely audible. 2. Exactly. You've been blacklisted. Unofficially, untraceable, but completely effective. The other voice softened, turned persuasive. I'm offering you a way to expose them. To make them pay for what they did to you, and to the workers whose safety they've compromised. You'll be compensated, protected, and when it's over, you'll have enough money to start over anywhere you choose. What do I have to do? Be a name on paperwork, a face for a company that exists on paper only. We'll handle everything else. You'll receive payments, deposit them in accounts we set up, and when the time is right, evidence of Meridian's corruption will come to light. They'll be investigated, fined, possibly shut down. Justice. I stopped the recording, my heart pounding. Michael had been recruited, manipulated into this scheme with promises of revenge and justice. Whoever this man was, He'd found my son at his most vulnerable and used him like a weapon. I clicked through to another file, dated 6 months later. Never agreed to fraud. You said we'd expose safety violations, not steal designs. The designs contain the evidence, Michael. The flaws are built in. When Hartwell's product fails, investigators will trace it back to Meridian's compromised engineering. Everything connects. People at Hartwell are losing their jobs because of this. People at Meridian endangered lives with their negligence. There are casualties in every war. You need to trust the process. I want out. That's not possible. You're empty solutions on every legal document. You've accepted millions in payments. If you try to walk away now, you go to prison. If you cooperate, you'll be protected when the truth comes out. A pause, menacing now. And Michael? Your mother still lives in that farmhouse, doesn't she? Very isolated. Would be terrible if something happened during a burglary. These rural areas, law enforcement response times can be 20 minutes or more. The recording ended. I sat frozen, understanding flooding through me. Michael hadn't been protecting himself. He'd been protecting me. Trapped in a scheme he couldn't escape. Threatened with violence against his mother if he didn't comply. The next recording was only 3 days old. They're closing in. The FBI questioned me again yesterday. Michael's voice was exhausted, defeated. They know about the payments, the company registration, everything. Then you know what you have to do. I can't run. My mother. We'll be fine if you disappear. We'll be a target if you stay and talk. Choose, Michael. What kind of choice is that? The only one you have left. 48 hours. Get your affairs in order. We'll contact you with instructions. The file ended. I checked the date, 5 days ago, which meant Michael's deadline had passed. Which meant a knock on my door made me jump so violently I nearly knocked over the laptop. I closed it quickly, ejected the flash drive, and looked through the window. Bruce Rogers stood on my porch, and he wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits flanked him, FBI unmistakably. The dark sedan was parked in my driveway. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mr. Rogers, what a surprise. Mrs. Campbell, these are special agents with the FBI. They have some questions about your son. Agent Morrison stepped forward, showing his badge. He was mid-40s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many people lie. Mrs. Campbell, we have reason to believe Michael Campbell is planning to flee the country. We have a warrant to search this property. He handed me the paperwork. I scanned it quickly, signed by a federal judge, authorizing search of both the main house and guest house for evidence related to wire fraud, corporate espionage, and money laundering. Michael isn't here, I said. He's at work. At Meridian Manufacturing? Agent Morrison's expression suggested he knew better. Ma'am, we've established that your son hasn't worked there in over a year. We need to know where he actually goes each night. I don't know. You expect us to believe you've lived 50 yards from your son for 6 years and never noticed he wasn't actually going to work? I expect you to believe that a grown man's activities are his own business. I stepped back, letting them enter. I had no choice, but I'd bought myself 30 seconds to think. Search whatever you need to. You won't find anything. Because Michael had already mailed the evidence. Whatever was in that envelope he'd sent from the post office, it was gone now, beyond their reach. The agents spread through my house with practiced efficiency. I sat at my kitchen table, the flash drive hidden against my skin, and watched them dismantle my life. They photographed everything, opened drawers, checked cabinets. One agent went through my trash while another examined my computer. Bruce Rogers stayed near me, his expression apologetic. Mrs. Campbell, if you know where Michael is, now is the time to tell us. If he runs, we'll find him eventually, but it will be much worse for him. You still haven't told me what you think he's done. We know what he's done. $3 million in fraudulent sales to Hartwell Agricultural, corporate espionage, wire fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. He leaned closer. But we also know he might not have acted alone. If he cooperates, if he identifies whoever recruited him into this scheme, the prosecution might be willing to negotiate. You want him to betray someone. We want the truth. Your son is facing 20 years in federal prison. If there's a bigger fish, we need to know. Agent Morrison returned from the guest house holding Michael's laptop and the shoeboxes I'd found in the closet. Computers password protected. We'll need forensics. But look what was hidden in his bedroom. He opened the boxes, showing Rogers the cash and prepaid credit cards. Less than I'd seen before. Michael had been taking money gradually, preparing for something. Flight risk, Morrison said. He's planning to run. Mrs. Campbell, your son withdrew $15,000 in cash over the past week. He has fake IDs, prepaid phones, everything needed to disappear. If you know his plans, I don't. Then you're either remarkably unobservant or deliberately obstructing a federal investigation. He closed the boxes. We're seizing these as evidence. We're also placing surveillance on this property. If Michael returns, we'll know immediately. They left an hour later, taking Michael's laptop, his cash, his ledger, and my sense of safety. Bruce Rogers was the last to leave, pausing at my door. I'm sorry it came to this. I hoped you'd help us quietly. He glanced back at the guest house. Your son made choices, Mrs. Campbell. Bad choices that hurt a lot of innocent people. You can't save him from consequences, but you can spare yourself from becoming collateral damage. Think about that. After they left, I stood in my ransacked kitchen and tried to think clearly. The FBI had Michael's records, but not the audio files. They had evidence of his involvement, but not proof of his coercion. Without the recordings, he looked guilty of everything they suspected. I needed to get the flash drive to someone who could use it. But who? Lewis Marks at Hartwell? She might be the mysterious recruiter herself, playing both sides. Bruce Rogers at Meridian? He seemed genuine, but he worked for the company that had allegedly blacklisted Michael in the first place. The FBI? They'd already decided Michael was guilty. My phone rang. The prepaid one I'd bought. Only one person had this number, because I'd only called one person with it. Bruce Rogers. But the caller ID showed an unknown number. I answered. Hello? Mrs. Campbell. We haven't been formally introduced, but I'm the person your son has been working for. The voice from the recordings, cultured, calm, menacing. I understand you've been quite busy today. The bank, the post office, your various meetings. You're more resourceful than Michael led me to believe. Ice flooded my veins. Who are you? Someone with access to information. For instance, I know you have recordings that could be problematic for everyone involved. I'm willing to pay substantial money for that flash drive, enough to ensure your comfortable retirement and Michael's legal defense. $1 million, transferred to any account you specify. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, the FBI will receive an anonymous tip about the safety deposit box. They'll find all those files Michael so carefully preserved, files with your fingerprints all over them now. You'll be charged as an accessory to fraud. At 72, how many years do you think you'll survive in federal prison? My hand tightened on the phone. You'd frame me like you framed Michael? I prefer to think of it as providing motivation. You have 12 hours to decide. I'll call with delivery instructions. He paused. Oh, and Mrs. Campbell, don't bother trying to trace this call or report it. I have friends in many places, law enforcement included. No one will believe an elderly woman's conspiracy theories when presented with documented evidence of her son's crimes and her own complicity. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, in the home I'd lived in for 47 years, and realized I was completely alone. The FBI thought Michael was a criminal. Hartwell might be using me. Meridian might be covering up their own corruption. My daughters had written me off as incompetent. And somewhere out there, a puppet master with unknown resources was threatening to destroy what remained of my family. I had 12 hours. 12 hours to decide whether to surrender the only evidence that could save my son, or risk imprisonment myself by trying to use it. At 8 o'clock, Michael's truck pulled into the driveway. I watched from my window as he parked, then stopped when he saw the guest house door hanging open from the FBI search. He turned, looking at the main house, and our eyes met through the window. Then he did something that broke my heart. He got back in his truck, reversed, and drove away without even turning off the engine. He was running, exactly as the FBI predicted, exactly as his recruiter demanded. And I was the only person who could prove he'd been a victim from the beginning. I made my decision. I called the one number I hadn't tried yet. The one person who might actually want the truth more than they wanted a convenient scapegoat. Louis Marks answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Campbell? I have proof," I said. Proof that Michael was coerced. Proof that someone at Meridian orchestrated everything. Proof that Hartwell was set up just like my son was set up. Silence. Then, "Where did you get this proof? Does it matter? I have recordings of the person who recruited Michael. Voice recordings, threats, the whole scheme. But I need your help to use them correctly. And I need to know right now, are you hunting my son, or are you trying to save your company?" "Both," she said honestly. "But I'd rather save 3,000 jobs than destroy one scapegoat. What do you need?" "A safe place to analyze these recordings, technical help to identify the voice, and legal protection when we go public. Come to Hartwell, now, tonight. I'll have our security team escort you. They'll be watching my house, the FBI, and probably others. Then we'll make sure you're not followed." She paused. "Mrs. Campbell, if what you have is real, it could save everyone. Michael, Hartwell, even expose the real criminals. But we need to move fast. If he runs, we lose any chance of clearing his name. He already ran. I just watched him leave. Then we have hours, maybe less. I'm sending a car for you. 20 minutes. Pack whatever you need for a few days." She hung up and I stood in my kitchen, weighing impossible choices. Trust Louis Marks, who might be the enemy. Stay home and wait for the puppet master's call, selling out my son's only evidence. Call the FBI and hope they'd listen to an old woman's story. Or do what I'd done my whole life. Trust my instincts, protect my child, and refuse to surrender until there was no fight left in me. I packed a bag, hid the flash drive in a place no one would think to look, inside a tampon box in my bathroom cabinet, and waited for Louis Marks's promised car. Outside my window, I saw headlights approaching, and behind them, in the darkness, another set of lights. Someone else was coming, and I had a terrible feeling I was about to discover that everyone I'd spoken to had been playing me from the beginning. The first car was a black SUV with Hartwell corporate plates. The second was Bruce Rogers's sedan, and behind them both, flashing lights, a county sheriff's vehicle. I stood in my doorway, my packed bag at my feet, and watched 3 separate forces converge on my property like a perfectly choreographed ambush. Louis Marks emerged from the SUV wearing a bulletproof vest. Bruce Rogers got out of his car with 2 men I recognized from Meridian's security team. And Sheriff Tom Brennan, who'd gone to high school with my late husband, stepped out of his cruiser with his hand resting on his weapon. "Mrs. Campbell," Louis called out, moving toward my porch. "Come with us. Now, it's not safe here." "Don't move, Mrs. Campbell." Bruce Rogers positioned himself between Louis and me. "This woman is wanted for questioning in connection with corporate fraud. She's not here to help you." Sheriff Brennan held up both hands, his weathered face creased with confusion. "Everybody just calm down. Cynthia, what in heaven's name is going on? I got 3 different emergency calls about this address in the past 10 minutes. 3 calls? I looked between them. Who called you, Tom? Your daughter Susan said you were being harassed by corporate investigators. Meridian's security chief said there was a potential hostage situation, and some anonymous tip claimed you were fleeing the state with stolen evidence." He shook his head. "So I'd really appreciate some straight answers. Because this is the most excitement we've had in this county since the Anderson barn fire." I almost laughed. Almost. Because standing on my porch with 3 separate parties claiming authority over my fate, I finally understood what had been happening all along. They'd all been watching me, following me, waiting to see which way I'd jump, and I'd led every one of them exactly where they needed to be to reveal themselves. "Tom," I said calmly, "I need you to witness something. All of you, actually. Because we're going to settle this right now, tonight, in a way that leaves no room for doubt." "Mrs. Campbell, this isn't a negotiation," Bruce Rogers began. "You're right, it's not." I stepped back into my house. "You all want answers? You all want evidence? Fine, come inside, all of you. But we do this by the rules. Tom, you're the law here. You make sure nobody tries anything stupid." Sheriff Brennan looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he nodded. "All right, Cynthia. But I swear, if this turns into some kind of siege situation, I'm calling for backup. Won't be necessary. I held the door open. Please, let's have this conversation like civilized people. They filed in slowly, eyeing each other with open hostility. Louis Marks stayed close to the door, clearly ready to bolt. Bruce Rogers positioned himself where he could watch everyone. The Meridian security guards flanked him like bookends. Sheriff Brennan stood in the middle, hand still near his weapon. I closed the door and locked it. First, I said, moving to my kitchen table where my old laptop still sat. Let me show you what I found today. I opened the laptop, inserted the flash drive, and turned the speaker volume to maximum. Then I played the recordings. All of them. The recruitment, the coercion, the threats against me. The mysterious man's voice explaining exactly how he'd manipulated Michael into becoming the face of MT Solutions. The room was silent, except for the recordings. I watched their faces. Louis Marks looked vindicated. Bruce Rogers looked increasingly pale. Sheriff Brennan's expression hardened with each revealed detail. When the recordings finished, I removed the flash drive and held it up. This is proof that Michael Campbell was coerced into corporate espionage. Proof that he was threatened. Proof that someone orchestrated this entire scheme to defraud Hartwell and frame my son for it. That could be fabricated, one of the Meridian security guards said. Voice recordings can be faked. True, I agreed, which is why I have supporting documentation. I pulled out my phone and displayed the photographs I'd taken of Michael's ledger, the cash in his closet, the note in the safety deposit box. These show the timeline of payments, Michael's own records indicating he knew he was being set up, and his attempts to preserve evidence. You illegally searched your son's residence, Bruce Rogers said. Any evidence you gathered would be inadmissible. I searched my own guest house, which I own, using a key I've always had. Perfectly legal. I met his eyes. But you already knew that, didn't you, Mr. Rogers? Because you've been very interested in what I might find. Interested enough to show me confidential documents on my first visit. Interested enough to bring the FBI to my door today. Almost like you were trying to control the narrative. His jaw tightened. I was trying to get justice for my company. Were you? Or were you trying to make sure the investigation never looked too closely at Meridian's internal operations? I pulled out another set of photographs, the ones I'd taken of documents in Michael's safety deposit box. Because according to these files, Michael filed 17 separate safety violation reports over a 3-year period. Reports documenting falsified quality control, unauthorized design modifications, and systemic corner cutting to reduce manufacturing costs. Reports that were all suppressed by Meridian management. Bruce Rogers's face went white. Where did you get those? From the safety deposit box Michael set up specifically to preserve evidence. Evidence he was collecting long before he supposedly became a criminal? I spread the photos across my kitchen table. Michael wasn't recruited by Hartwell. He was recruited by someone who wanted to destroy both companies, someone who knew about Meridian's corruption, and used stolen designs to set up Hartwell for failure while framing Michael for everything. That's speculation, Rogers said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I turned to Louis Marks. When MT Solutions approached you, who made first contact? She frowned, thinking. A consulting firm. They said they represented an engineer with proprietary agricultural technology. We vetted them, checked their credentials. What was the consulting firm's name? Rogers Industrial Consulting. The room went silent. Everyone looked at Bruce Rogers. That's a common name, he said quickly. Could be coincidence. Could be, I agreed. Except the recordings identify the man who recruited Michael as someone with intimate knowledge of both Meridian and Hartwell's operations. Someone who could forge Michael's signature convincingly. Someone who had access to Meridian's proprietary designs and the authority to make them disappear from secure servers. I paused. Someone like an operations supervisor with 30 years at the company. You're accusing me? Rogers laughed, but it sounded forced. This is insane. I'm the one who reported the theft. After Hartwell announced their product, after they'd invested millions based on flawed designs, you reported it precisely when it would cause maximum damage to both companies. I pulled out one more photograph, This one from a newspaper article I'd found in Michael's files. You also filed for bankruptcy 6 years ago. Lost your house, your savings, everything. The same year Meridian restructured and eliminated your pension. You had motive, Mr. Rogers. You had access. And you had the expertise to pull this off. This is circumstantial nonsense, Rogers said. But he was backing toward the door now. The security guards looked uncertain, no longer sure whose orders to follow. Sheriff Brennan stepped forward. Bruce, I'm going to need you to stay put while we sort this out. I don't have to listen to the paranoid theories of a desperate old woman. Actually, you do. I walked to my china cabinet and pulled out a small recording device I'd hidden there before everyone arrived. A voice-activated recorder I'd placed in my kitchen after the FBI search. Because while all of you were busy following me, investigating me, and trying to control what I knew, I was recording every conversation in this house, including the phone call I received this afternoon. I pressed play. The puppet master's voice filled the room. I'm willing to pay substantial money for that flash drive. Enough to ensure your comfortable retirement and Michael's legal defense. $1 million. I watched Bruce Rogers' face drain of all color as his own voice continued. You have 12 hours to decide. I'll call with delivery instructions. That's not... I never... He stopped, realizing that denial was pointless. You called me from a blocked number, I continued. But you didn't count on me having a recorder running. And you didn't count on me recognizing your voice from our conversations. You were careful on the recordings with Michael. Careful not to use your name, careful to disguise your approach. But you got sloppy with me. You thought I was just a frightened old woman who'd fold under pressure. Louis Marks moved between Rogers and the door. You destroyed my company. 3,000 jobs gone because of your revenge scheme. Meridian destroyed my life first, Rogers shouted, his composure finally cracking. 30 years of loyalty, and they eliminated my pension to pad executive bonuses. They falsified safety reports, cut corners, endangered workers, and when I reported it internally, they made sure I'd never advance, never get what I was owed. So yes, I took their precious designs. I used them to set up a competitor for failure. I made sure everyone would suffer like I suffered. And Michael? I asked quietly. What did he ever do to you? Rogers looked at me, and I saw something broken behind his eyes. He was going to expose the safety violations. After I'd already started the plan with Hartwell, Michael filed new reports, started asking questions again. I couldn't let him ruin everything, so I approached him, convinced him we were on the same side, and made him the face of MT Solutions. He was supposed to be too stupid to figure it out, but he did figure it out. I held up the flash drive. He figured it out and documented everything. The only thing he couldn't figure out was how to stop you without getting himself or me killed. Sheriff Brennan had his handcuffs out now. Bruce Rogers, I'm placing you under arrest for, well, for a whole lot of things. The FBI can sort out the specific charges. Rogers didn't resist as Tom cuffed him. He just looked at me with something between hatred and grudging respect. How long have you known? I started suspecting when you knew my name at the bank. The teller said Michael had added me to the safety deposit box account last week, but Michael had been avoiding me for months. He wouldn't have suddenly added me unless someone told him to. Someone who wanted to make sure I'd find that evidence eventually. Someone who was planning to use it against me if necessary. That's a pretty thin deduction. It was. But then, you made mistakes. You brought the FBI to my house with perfect timing, right after I'd visited the bank. You knew exactly when to apply pressure. And when you called me this afternoon, you mentioned things only someone following me closely would know. My meetings, my movements, details that even the FBI surveillance wouldn't have captured. I smiled slightly. And you underestimated me. You thought a 72-year-old woman wouldn't remember basic investigative principles. But I spent 40 years in emergency rooms, Mr. Rogers. I know how to observe. I know how to document. And I know when someone's running a con. Sheriff Brennan led Rogers toward the door. I'll call the FBI. They're going to want to hear those recordings. Wait, Louis Marks said. She turned to me. Where's Michael now? If he's running, they'll assume he's guilty even with this evidence. He's not running. Not exactly. I pulled out my regular phone and sent a text to a number I'd memorized but never called. 3 words. It's over. Come home. Within 2 minutes, headlights appeared in my driveway. Michael's truck. He'd been close by this whole time, waiting for my signal. He walked in slowly, looking at the assembled crowd with obvious fear. When he saw Rogers in handcuffs, his legs nearly gave out. "Mom? How did you?" "I did what mothers do," I said simply. I protected my child. Even when he was too stubborn to ask for help. Michael crossed the room and hugged me, and I felt him shaking. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. He said he'd hurt you if I told anyone, and I couldn't risk—" "I know. I heard the recordings. I know everything." I held him tight. This son who'd kept me at arm's length for years because he was trying to protect me. "We're going to fix this. All of it." Lewis Marks cleared her throat. "Mrs. Campbell, Hartwell will need those recordings and files as evidence in our civil case against Meridian. We'll also need Michael's testimony. In exchange for? Full immunity, acknowledgement that he was a victim of coercion, and a job if he wants it. We're going to need good people to rebuild." She glanced at the security guards. People who actually report problems instead of covering them up. I looked at Michael. "What do you think?" "I think I've been making terrible decisions for over a year. Maybe I should start listening to someone smarter." He managed a weak smile. "You always said I should ask for help more often." "I also said you should call your mother more than twice a year. But we'll address that later." I turned to Sheriff Brennan. "Tom, what happens now?" "Now I take Mr. Rogers into custody, call the FBI, and let people way above my pay grade sort out the federal charges." He tipped his hat to me. "Cynthia, your husband would have been proud. You ran one heck of an investigation here." After they all left, Rogers in custody, Louis Marks with copies of the recordings, the Meridian security guards looking for new employment, Michael and I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee in the sudden quiet. "You knew?" he said finally. "When did you figure out it was Rogers?" "I didn't know for certain until tonight, but I suspected after too many coincidences piled up, and I prepared for multiple scenarios." I showed him the recorder I'd hidden in my china cabinet. That was Plan A, get everyone in the same room and let Rogers reveal himself. If that hadn't worked, I had Plan B through D ready. What was Plan B? Release the recordings to the media anonymously and let public pressure force an investigation. And Plan C? Call every news outlet in 3 states and make enough noise that someone would have to listen to an old woman's story. I sipped my coffee. I didn't become a nurse by giving up at the first obstacle, Michael. I learned to prepare, to adapt, and to fight for my patients. You're my son. You think I'd fight any less hard for you? He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry I shut you out. I thought I was protecting you." "I know. And I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner that you were in trouble." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We both made mistakes, but we're going to fix them. Together. Like we should have been doing all along." Outside, dawn was breaking over the Indiana farmland. The Christmas lights on my porch still twinkled, though I'd forgotten to turn them off the night before. Through the window, I could see the guest house, the place where Michael had hidden himself away, where he'd kept secrets that nearly destroyed him. "Are you going to stay in the guest house?" I asked. Michael shook his head. "Actually, I was thinking maybe I could move back into the main house for a while. If you don't mind, I'd like to spend some time getting to know my mother again. Turns out she's pretty amazing." I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. "I'd like that. And Michael, next time someone threatens you, threatens me, or tries to manipulate you into anything, I'll tell you immediately. I promise." "Good. Because I'm 72 years old, and I just took down a corrupt corporate executive and saved 3,000 jobs. Imagine what I could do if someone actually made me angry." He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. And as the sun rose on a new day, I knew that whatever came next, FBI interviews, legal proceedings, family reconciliation, we would face it together, the way it should have been all along, the way it would be from now on. Because I'd learned something important in the past week. Age wasn't a weakness. Experience wasn't obsolete. And a mother's love combined with 7 decades of hard-earned wisdom was more powerful than any corporate conspiracy. My daughters would learn that too, eventually. But that was a battle for another day. 3 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen making Christmas cookies. The same recipe my mother had taught me 60 years ago. The same recipe I'd made every December of my adult life. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, like normalcy slowly returning to a world that had been upended. Michael sat at the table, his laptop open, reviewing employment contracts from Hartwell Agricultural. They'd offered him a position in their quality assurance department. Fitting, given that his insistence on reporting safety violations had started this entire nightmare. The pay was good, the benefits better, and most importantly, they valued his integrity instead of punishing it. Mom, this clause about relocation. Do you think I should negotiate to stay local? Or would a fresh start somewhere else be better? I looked at my son, really looked at him. The shadows under his eyes had faded. The tension in his shoulders had eased. He'd moved back into the main house temporarily, sleeping in his childhood bedroom while we figured out next steps. Some mornings I woke to the smell of coffee he'd already brewed, and we'd sit together watching the sunrise like we used to when he was a boy. "What do you want?" I asked. "Honestly, I want to stay close to home. Close to you. I've spent too many years running from things, avoiding things, hiding things. I'm tired of it. Then negotiate to stay local. Good employers accommodate good employees." I slid a tray of cookies into the oven. Besides, I'm 72. I might need someone to shovel my driveway in a few years. In a few years, I'll be happy to. But right now, you could probably out-shovel me and solve a murder while doing it. I smiled at that. The story of how I'd exposed Bruce Rogers had spread through our small Indiana county like wildfire. Sheriff Tom Brennan couldn't stop telling people about the night Cynthia Campbell gathered every suspect in her kitchen and ran a better interrogation than the FBI. The local newspaper had run a feature story. I'd had to unplug my landline because of all the calls. The attention embarrassed me, but it had one useful side effect. Susan and Vanessa had been noticeably absent. No demands about assisted living. No pressure to sell the property. No calculated discussions of inheritance. They were coming today, though. I'd invited them for what I'd described as a family meeting to discuss recent events. They'd agreed with obvious reluctance. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock sharp. Susan and Vanessa arrived together, as they always did, presenting a united front. They settled into my living room with matching expressions of wary politeness. "Mom, we saw the news coverage," Susan began carefully. "We had no idea you were dealing with all of that. If we'd known..." "You would have what?" I set down a tray of coffee and cookies. "Believed me? Helped me? Or tried even harder to have me declared incompetent?" Silence. Vanessa had the grace to look uncomfortable. I sat in my husband's old armchair and looked at my daughter and daughter-in-law. These women I'd loved, welcomed, supported through countless crises. Let me tell you what the past few weeks have taught me. When I needed help, when I was facing something genuinely dangerous, neither of you asked what was wrong. You assumed I was declining. You made plans to sell my property and confine me to assisted living without ever considering that I might be capable of handling my own life. "We were worried," Susan started. "You were greedy." The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't soften them. Every conversation we've had in the past year has circled back to this property, its value, how much easier your lives would be if I'd just surrender control and let you manage everything. You didn't see a mother who might need support. You saw an asset to be liquidated. Vanessa bristled. "That's not fair. We had legitimate concerns about you living alone." "Did you?" "Because when I actually was in danger, when people were following me, threatening me, when my son was facing federal prison, neither of you noticed. You were too busy pricing retirement homes and calculating inheritance." "Mom, please." Susan's voice cracked slightly. "We made mistakes. We should have listened better, should have trusted you more, but we did worry about you. We do love you. I believe you love me, but I also believe you'd convinced yourselves that loving me meant controlling me, that because I'm 72, I must be incompetent. That age automatically equals inability." I leaned forward. "Let me be crystal clear. I am not selling this property. I am not moving into assisted living. And I am not discussing my estate plans with either of you until I'm good and ready. This is my home. These are my decisions. And you will respect both, or you will not be welcome here. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Robert's old clock. Finally, Susan spoke, her voice small. What do you want from us? I want you to see me as a person, not a problem to be managed. I want you to understand that I have decades of experience, wisdom, and capability that don't disappear just because I've reached a certain age. I want you to trust that when I need help, I'll ask for it, but that asking for help and surrendering autonomy are not the same thing. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. And if we can't do that, if we still think assisted living would be safer, then you're welcome to your opinion, but you're not welcome to pressure me about it. My health, my housing, my choices, those are mine to make. You can offer advice when asked. You cannot make demands. I softened slightly. I raised 2 children, worked 40 years in emergency medicine, nursed my husband through his final illness, and just exposed a corporate conspiracy that fooled the FBI. I think I've earned the right to be trusted with my own life. Susan was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I think I was so scared of losing you that I tried to control everything. Put you somewhere I thought you'd be safe, even if it meant taking away your freedom. I know, sweetheart. But here's what you need to understand. Safety without dignity isn't kindness. Protection without respect isn't love. I'd rather live independently and take risks than exist in comfortable confinement. I reached over and took her hand. I'm not immortal. Someday, I will need more help. But that day isn't today. And when it comes, I need to know you'll involve me in the decisions instead of making them for me. I promise, Susan whispered. I'll do better. Vanessa stood abruptly. I need some air. She walked to the window, looking out at the farm. When she spoke again, her voice was different, rawer, more honest. My mother went into a nursing home when she was 75. She hated it, begged us to take her home. But we kept her there because the doctors said it was safer, and she died within a year. I've always wondered if we killed her by putting safety ahead of her happiness. I hadn't known that. Vanessa never talked about her mother. I think, she continued slowly, I've been projecting that guilt onto you, trying to make a different choice, a better choice, but really just trying to ease my own conscience. She turned to face me. You're right. We weren't seeing you. We were seeing our own fears and failures. Then see me now, I said gently. See a woman who's still capable, still sharp, still deserving of respect and autonomy. See someone who will ask for help when she needs it, but who also knows her own mind. Vanessa nodded, wiping her eyes. I can do that. I want to do that. Michael emerged from the kitchen, where he'd been diplomatically absent during the confrontation. Anyone want to hear the actual good news? The FBI recovered most of the money Roger stole. Hartwell is using it to rehire workers. Meridian is facing a massive investigation into their safety violations, but they've agreed to implement real oversight and bring back the pension program they eliminated. And I got a call this morning. 3 other workers who were blacklisted after reporting violations are being offered settlements and their jobs back. So something good came out of all this nightmare, Susan said. A lot of good, Michael corrected. Mom didn't just save me. She saved thousands of jobs, exposed corporate corruption, and forced real accountability. She did what I was too scared to do. She stood up and fought back. I felt my cheeks warm. I just did what needed doing. No, Vanessa said firmly. You did what most people wouldn't have the courage or intelligence to do. You investigated, documented, strategized, and won. At 72, against corporations, federal agencies, and a criminal who'd planned this for years. She smiled slightly. I think we've been severely underestimating you. Most people do, I said. They see gray hair and assume diminished capacity. They see age and assume obsolescence. But experience is valuable. Wisdom is powerful. And underestimating your opponent is always a mistake, especially when that opponent has 7 decades of hard-earned knowledge to draw on. We talked for another hour. Real conversation, honest and sometimes painful, but healing in a way our interactions hadn't been in years. Susan apologized again, with more specificity this time, acknowledging particular moments when she'd been dismissive or controlling. Vanessa shared more about her mother, about her guilt and fear, about how she'd let those emotions cloud her judgment. When they finally left, Susan hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom. And I'm sorry it took something this dramatic for me to really see you. We all have blind spots," I said. "The important thing is being willing to recognize them." After they left, Michael and I sat on the porch, despite the December cold, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set over the Indiana farmland. "You think they'll really change?" he asked. "I think they'll try. Whether they succeed," I shrugged. "We'll see. But at least now they understand what's expected. What I'll accept and what I won't. You've gotten tougher in your old age." "I've always been tough. I just used to hide it better." I smiled at him. "Your father used to say I had a spine of steel wrapped in velvet. Most people only saw the velvet." "What changed?" "Nothing changed. I just stopped pretending to be softer than I am for other people's comfort." I pulled the blanket tighter. "When you spend your whole life being accommodating, being the peacekeeper, being the person who smooths things over, eventually you realize you've accommodated yourself right into invisibility. People stop seeing you as a person with your own needs and boundaries. They see you as a supporting character in their stories. And you decided to be the protagonist of your own story. I decided I'd been the protagonist all along. I just needed to remind everyone else of that fact." I looked at my son. "You're going to be okay, Michael. Better than okay. You're going to take this experience and use it to build something good. I know you will. Because you have faith in me? Because you've already proven you're willing to sacrifice everything to protect the people you love. That kind of character doesn't disappear. It just needs the right circumstances to shine." I paused. "Though next time, maybe talk to your mother before making noble sacrifices? We could save everyone a lot of trouble." He laughed. "Deal. Though I hope there won't be a next time. With your luck, we should probably plan for it." As darkness fell completely, we went inside to the warm house that had sheltered my family for nearly half a century. Michael retreated to his childhood room to finalize his employment contract. I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes and thinking about everything that had happened. A month ago, I'd been invisible, a polite old woman living a quiet life, largely ignored by her children, dismissed by society as past her prime. Then my son's secret life had exploded into crisis, and I'd been forced to become someone different, or rather, to reveal who I'd always been underneath the accommodating exterior. I thought about the recordings I'd made, the evidence I'd gathered, the way I'd maneuvered everyone into my kitchen for that final confrontation. I thought about the moment Bruce Rogers realized he'd been outplayed by the desperate old woman he'd tried to manipulate and threaten. I'd won. Not through force or violence or youth or strength. I'd won through observation, patience, documentation, and strategic thinking. I'd won by using every skill I'd developed over 7 decades of life. Nursing instincts, investigative methodology, emotional intelligence, and the kind of stubborn determination that comes from surviving cancer, widowhood, and raised 2 children through their teenage years. Age hadn't weakened me. It had armed me with tools younger people hadn't had time to develop yet. The phone rang, my regular landline, which I'd finally reconnected. I answered to find Lewis Marks on the other end. "Mrs. Campbell, I wanted to let you know that Hartwell's board met today. We're naming our new quality assurance building after you, the Cynthia Campbell Center for Corporate Integrity. It seemed appropriate, given that your integrity is what saved our company." I was speechless for a moment. "That's very kind, but unnecessary." "It's entirely necessary. What you did went beyond helping your son or exposing a criminal. You reminded an entire corporation what matters. People over profits, truth over convenience, integrity over expedience. We need that reminder in permanent form." She paused. "Also, we'd like to offer you a consulting position. Part-time, flexible hours, advising on corporate ethics and quality assurance protocols. We need someone who won't be intimidated by executives or swayed by politics. Someone who'll tell us the truth even when it's uncomfortable. I almost laughed. A month ago, my daughters wanted to put me in assisted living. Now, a major corporation wanted my expertise. How much time would this require? A few hours a week. Maybe a monthly meeting. Completely at your discretion. But having your voice in our decision-making process would be invaluable, and it pays quite well. Let me think about it, I said, though I was already leaning toward yes. Not for the money, I had Robert's life insurance and my nursing pension, but for the validation that my knowledge, experience, and judgment still had value in the world. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and looked around at the home I'd fought to keep, the home where I'd raised children and buried dreams and built new ones. The home my daughters had wanted to sell out from under me because they'd decided I was too old to manage my own life. The home I'd defended by proving I was sharper, tougher, and more capable than anyone had given me credit for. Through the window, I could see the guest house where Michael had hidden his secrets and his shame. Tomorrow, we'd start clearing it out. He wouldn't need it anymore. Maybe I'd convert it back into Robert's workshop. Maybe I'd turn it into something new entirely. Either way, it would no longer be a place of isolation and fear. It would be something better, something hopeful, just like the rest of my life. I was 72 years old. I'd just taken down a corporate conspiracy, saved my son from federal prison, protected thousands of jobs, and reset boundaries with my daughters that should have been established years ago. And I was tired. Bone-tired in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the emotional toll of the past month. But I was also satisfied, proud even, because I'd proven something important, not just to my family or to the corporations or to law enforcement, but to myself. I'd proven that the skills, wisdom, and strength I'd accumulated over 7 decades weren't obsolete. They were my greatest weapons. My age wasn't a limitation. It was an advantage. Every challenge I'd faced, every crisis I'd navigated, every hard lesson I'd learned had prepared me for exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes situation I'd just survived. Young people had speed and energy, but I had patience, perspective, and the kind of strategic thinking that only comes from playing the long game for 72 years. And that was worth more than they'd ever given me credit for. I stood and turned off the kitchen lights, ready for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. FBI interviews about the case, decisions about Michael's future, ongoing negotiations with Susan and Vanessa about our relationship. But those were problems for tomorrow. Tonight, I would sleep in my own bed, in my own home, on my own terms. Victorious not through force, but through wisdom. Not despite my age, but because of it. And if anyone ever underestimated me again, well, they'd been warned. I smiled in the darkness and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, where Robert's photograph still sat on the nightstand. I picked it up, looking at his familiar face. I handled it, I told him. Our son, the house, everything. I handled it the way you always said I could when I stopped worrying about what everyone else thought. I could almost hear his voice responding. I never doubted you for a second, Cynthia. I just wondered when you'd stop doubting yourself. I set the photograph down and climbed into bed, pulling the quilts up to my chin. Outside, snow had begun to fall. The first real snow of the season, covering the farmland in fresh white silence. A clean slate, a new beginning. And somewhere in the house below, my son slept peacefully for the first time in over a year, knowing his mother had fought for him and won, knowing that he was safe, knowing that family, real family, meant protecting each other without conditions, supporting each other without judgment, and trusting each other even when the world demanded otherwise. I closed my eyes and drifted toward sleep, content in the knowledge that I'd done what needed doing. Not perfectly, perhaps, but honestly, courageously, and with every ounce of intelligence and determination I possessed. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and continue being exactly who I'd always been, a woman who refused to surrender, who valued truth over comfort, who protected those she loved with fierce devotion. But tonight I would rest, secure in my home, secure in my decisions, secure in the knowledge that 72 years of living had given me something no amount of youth could match, the wisdom to see what others missed, the courage to act when others hesitated, and the strength to stand firm when others wanted me to yield. Age had not diminished me. It had made me formidable, and I was only just beginning to show the world exactly how formidable I could be. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.